This is the Corolla Apex Edition. It's a special edition trim of the Toyota Corolla, and it means that you'll get blacked out badges, flow-formed glossy black wheels, some extra plastic bits on the front, sides, and rear to give it that more aggressive look, a firmer suspension and lowered stance, and on this model that I'm testing, there's also a modest but still racy looking spoiler. And most importantly, you can get this in manual transmission. Simply put, I'm seriously in love with this thing. It's fun to drive, it's lightweight, the summer tires are grippy, the mileage is decent at 28 city, 35 highway, and 31 combined. And I have to re-emphasize just how good this car looks, especially in this black paint. Now, I'm the type of person that likes to do tasteful cosmetic and performance upgrades to my cars. Take, for example, my Hyundai Veloster N. If you want to see my progress with that car, please click the link up here. So I really like it that instead of spending extra money on the body upgrades, the wheel upgrades, and suspension upgrades, Toyota basically has done that for you, and they've done it very tastefully. You can show up to your next car meet in the Apex Edition and blend in with the other modified cars. So to me, personally, this car is perfect, but if you don't care about any of those performance upgrades, then this might not be your best choice. And that's because of three main problems: ride quality, mileage, and price. Ride quality in here is very much like a car with aftermarket suspension upgrades. If you're not into that kind of thing, then you should outright just avoid this car. For the Apex Edition, the ride height has been lowered by 0.6 inches. So this has lowering springs with higher coil rates. And on top of that, this has been given thicker sway bars. So in effect, this has a much stiffer ride quality. And you'll feel this most of the time. Imperfect roads are going to feel jarring in here. This is a lightweight 3,000-pound car with stiff springs, so that means that any bumpy roads, you're going to get jostled and thrown around in here. And number two, mileage is not optimal, and that's because of this guy, the manual transmission. The manual transmission here is a joy to drive. The throw is a bit long, and it may not be sports car precise, but overall, this is one of the easiest manual transmissions to use. If you're trying to learn how to drive a manual car, this is the perfect car to do it in, because this shifter is so easy to maneuver. The clutch is super light. You barely have to give any gas. And also, in this car, there's something called intelligent manual transmission, which is basically rev matching. You can get rev matching in a Toyota Corolla. That means that if you're downshifting, you don't have to give it some gas so that the engine speed could catch up. The computer will basically just blip the throttle in here, and then you could just downshift, and all of that transition is super smooth. And if you don't know how to drive a manual, then that's probably not a problem at all, because good luck trying to find one of these things, because they've only made 6,000 of the Apex Editions, and 120 of them have manual transmissions. That's 2%. Now, you may not even want the manual transmission, because this is no longer the cheaper transmission. This is more expensive by $400 compared to the standard CVT. And another downside is that you'll lose 2 miles per gallon across the board. So worse in the city, worse in the highway, and worse combined compared to the CVT. So if you thought that you were going to save some money by going the manual route, I hope you're not too disappointed. And speaking of money, the third reason why this Corolla Apex Edition may not be your best choice is the price. This one starts at $25,000 before destination charges and other packages. At that price range, you have some attractive choices like the Honda Civic Si, which makes 205 horsepower versus the Corolla's 169 horsepower. The Hyundai Veloster Turbo r-spec is cheaper than this Corolla and has 201 horsepower. And if you have $2,500 extra dollars, you could find yourself in a Subaru WRX, and that has way more power and also has all-wheel drive. So at this price point, I'm not really sure if this is a good buy. But aside from these three problems, I am still in love with the Toyota Corolla. I've reviewed the Corolla Hybrid on this channel, which is a fantastic hybrid or a Prius clone that can get you up to 52 miles per gallon. And we've also reviewed the Corolla hatchback on this channel, and we love that car as well. The TNGA platform makes these cars handle so well for what it is. And on the Apex Edition, it's so much fun to drive in back roads. You have way more grip than you do power in this case. And this fact makes the Corolla Apex something that you really want to thrash around. In terms of power, This thing has a 2-liter engine that makes 169 horsepower and 151 pound-feet of torque. There are no turbos in here, which explains why it's underpowered compared to those other cars that I mentioned earlier. But a naturally aspirated engine is also fun to drive because the power delivery is smooth and predictable. Now, 169 horsepower doesn't sound like a lot on paper, but trust me, this car is actually quite fast if you really wring it out and drive it at the limits. Though once you start adding passengers, that fun factor quickly goes away. Now, as for interior comfort, everything about the Corolla screams budget, and the Apex Edition is no different. The seats are cloth, all the adjustments are manual, there's no heated seats, there's no heated steering wheel in this SE Apex Edition, there's no blind spot monitoring system, the stereo is basic, and the sound quality is between mediocre and substandard. There's also plenty of hard and soft plastics everywhere, but I do like the infotainment system because it's displayed on this modestly sized screen. The buttons are laid out nicely, the menu systems are simple to use, and there's also Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and Amazon Alexa as well. And lastly, I don't like that there's an electronic parking brake in here. I prefer the traditional lever style handbrake, but I get why it's not here. Most of these cars are equipped with CVTs, and to design 2 different center consoles would be costly to Toyota, considering that only 2% of the Apex Editions are to be sold in manual transmissions anyway. Now, the CVT in these cars are actually pretty good. We've tested the Toyota Corolla hatchback, and that has the CVT in it, and it's different than others you'll find in Subarus, Nissans, and also Hondas, because these CVTs will have a physical first gear, which means that in low speed situations, it's going to engage that physical first gear, so it will respond like a traditional transmission. But once you get to higher speeds, that physical first gear will disengage, and then it will react like a normal CVT. This is my favorite CVT design so far. It's still not as engaging as a manual transmission though. There are so many smart transmissions out there, CVTs, traditional automatics, dual clutch transmission, 8, 9, 10 speed automatic transmissions. Nothing is as fun or as engaging as a traditional manual transmission. And if you want to save the manuals, seriously, just buy the manuals, because this SE Apex Edition is an example of how the manual transmission is slowly being phased out. It now costs more to buy a manual transmission, and it has worse gas mileage, which means that it's putting more pressure on car companies to eliminate them because it brings down the overall production weighted fuel economy. So it makes sense why they're only producing 2% of these cars in manual transmissions, because they're more expensive, they're worse in mileage, and also no one is buying them. So aside from that, should you buy this car? You should if you're like me and you like to make minor performance and visual upgrades to your car. Now, Toyota has done that for you for free, and they've done it, like I said before, very tastefully. They've given you flow-formed wheels, which are much stronger, lighter, and more expensive than regular cast wheels. So you get better performance because of reduced unsprung weight and lower inertia, and they're also more pothole damage resistant. The front lip and side skirts are subtle and good looking, and on top of that, the lowering springs and thicker sway bars are also a big plus. If you were to do those upgrades at the aftermarket level, you can expect to spend anywhere between $2,000 to $4,000, depending if it's DIY or you pay someone else to do it. So this is kind of a good deal considering that this is from the factory and it's warrantied. But if you don't care about the flashy stuff, or if you want to do it yourself, you're better off getting the non-Apex editions, saving that money, and just buying all those parts yourself. Or if you care about having more power and more capability, there are more powerful cars with less or just a little bit more money. So in the end, it's really tough for me to recommend this car despite how much I love it. I think this will appeal to a very specific and small subset of buyers, and if you're that person, this is totally a good deal. But for everyone else, I think you should look elsewhere. So there you have it. That's my review of the 2021 Toyota Corolla Apex SE Edition. If you've learned something from this video, or if you found it entertaining, please consider hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe, and also hitting that notification bell so that you can get notified anytime we make a new video. Let's wrap it up right there. This has been the 2021 Toyota Corolla SE Apex Edition. My name's Hanson, and I'll see you next time.